Good morning. Exercise equals brain power. Boy, what does that mean? First of all, let's take a look at the brain. The human brain is the most complicated structure that's ever been investigated by scientists. The brain represents a very small percentage of our total body weight, but it requires a much, much larger proportion of our body's energy just to function. It is made up of literally billions of nerve cells called neurons. The function of a normal brain depends on the ability of those neurons to effectively communicate with one another. So we're going to look at the brain. The brain consists of different lobes. The back portion of your head or your brain is the occipital lobe. It is the smallest portion of all, smallest lobe of all. It is involved in vision as well as the initial stages of visual processing, such as the identifying of colors, shapes, objects, and where they are in space. Damage to the occipital lobe can result in visual hallucinations, limited field of vision, and inability to recognize faces and places, color blindness, and lack of understanding of what you're actually seeing. The top portion of your brain, the top center portion, of your brain is called the parietal lobe. It interprets and integrates information from the sensory areas, allowing the identification of what and where of objects. It is involved in touch and the initial stages of touch processing, interpreting the amount of pressure and the type of touch. Some of its functions include reading, writing, mathematical calculations, word comprehensions and meaning, language comprehension, and spatial relationships. The frontal lobe is involved in motor behavior. It is the largest of the cerebral regions, representing 1/3 of your total brain surface area. The front portion of the frontal lobe, or the prefrontal cortex, is involved with the highest functions of the brain, including the ability to plan and to highly integrate data, both physical and emotional, and it also controls your behaviors. It allows us to accurately assess our behaviors and respond to events and situations appropriately. A person with a frontal lobe damage may do well on an IQ test. However, in a social or real-life situation that requires mental flexibility and planning, they may be completely unable to cope. The frontal lobe the frontal lobe handles diverse functions such as fine finger movements and abstract thoughts. The temporal lobe, which includes the hippocampus, is where the memory of person, place, and things are consolidated. It controls hearing and understanding sounds, as well as instinctual and basic motor functions of the body. Damage to the frontal lobe can cause deafness, inability to interpret sounds, auditory hallucinations, impaired memory, confused speech, and impaired language comprehension. The cerebellum resides just above the brainstem and is involved in fine coordination and athletic skills. It controls body movements, balance, and eye movement. Damage to this area of the brain can cause impairment of posture, walk, movement of arms and legs. The amygdala is a small almond-shaped portion of the brain. It is important in your emotional functions. It is involved in assigning emotional meaning to events and objects. It also plays a special role in negative emotions such as fear, specifically the fight or flight response. Other effects include control over food intake, sexual behavior, aggression, and desire. The emotional center of the brain is the limbic system. It plays a role in mediating the experience of emotions, basic responses, and storage of memories. Damage to the limbic system can cause profound, acute depression, extreme pleasure, inappropriate fear, depersonalizations, dreamlike states, and memory loss. The structures of the brain are constantly changing. Each time a person learns something new, consciously or subconsciously, That experience alters the structure of the brain. Thus, neurotransmission not only contains current information, but if the learning occurs with the right intensity and pattern, it will alter subsequent neurotransmission. If an experience is notable enough to be retained in the memory, that experience will produce new synaptic connections, prune away old ones, and strengthen or weaken existing ones. Some experiences, such as stress, disease, or exposure to alcohol or other toxins, can kill those neurons. Current data demonstrates that new neurons can develop even in the adult brain. Brains are built and changed through experience and environment. Thus, nutrition, lifestyle, and numerous everyday choices has a profound effect on how our brains function and behave. Exercise has been thought to do everything from treat depression to improve memory to cure a host of problems, while preventing even more. Dr. Neil Nedley, in his book, Depression: The Way Out, stressed the importance of regular aerobic exercise to help with combating depression. Regular exercise will increase the serotonin levels in the brain and is as good as medicine for reducing depression. Exercise is found to be better than counseling for reducing depression and alleviates anxiety, substance abuse disorders, and ADHD. Exercise leads to the release of certain neurotransmitters in the brain that alleviate pain, both physical and mental. Additionally, it is one of the few ways scientists have found to generate new neurons. Exercise exerts its effects on the brain through several mechanisms, including neurogenesis, mood enhancement, and endorphin release. One of the most exciting changes that exercise causes is neurogenesis, or the recreation of new neurons. The new neurons are created in the hippocampus, the center of learning and in memory in the brain. It is felt that the mild stress that is generated by exercise stimulates an influx of calcium, which activates transcription factors in existing hippocampus neurons. The transcription factor initiates the expression of the brain-derived neurotrophic factor gene, or the BDNF, creating protein that acts to promote neurogenesis. Thus, the generation of this brain-derived neurotrophic factor is a protective response to stress, and it acts not only to generate new neurons, but also to protect existing neurons and to promote synaptic plasticity. However, the brain-derived neurotrophic factor effects are more than protective, they are reparative. This reparative effect is actually extremely important because, and very relevant to us, because our brain starts to lose nerve tissues beginning at the age of 30. Aerobic exercise reinforces neural connections by increasing the number of dendrite connections between the neurons, creating a denser network, which is then better able to process and store information. So, does that mean that we can exercise ourselves to brilliance? Absolutely not. Studies have shown that it is not possible to exercise to brilliance. However, fortunately, it is possible to exercise to happiness. It has been shown that physically active people recover from mild depression more quickly, and physical activity is strongly correlated with good mental health as people age. Depression is related to low levels of certain neurotransmitters like serotonin and norepinephrine. Exercise increases concentrations of these neurotransmitters by stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. In addition, serotonin has a reciprocal relationship with this BDNF. This boosts serotonin production, and serotonin signaling stimulates this BDNF expression. Since exercise also increases this BDNF, or the brain-derived neurotrophic production directly, there is a reinforcement of the serotonin BDNF loop, indicating exercise significant potential as a mood enhancer. Another factor to consider is the endorphins. Everybody has heard of endorphins. The chemical that is released by the pituitary gland in response to stress and pain. They bind to the opioid receptors in our brain, in each neuron. They block the release of the neurotransmitters and thus interfering with the transmission of pain impulses to the brain. Exercise stimulates the release of endorphins within approximately 30 minutes from the start of activity. Therefore, it's not an immediate response. These endorphins tend to minimize the discomforts of exercise and are even associated with the feelings of euphoria. It is felt that the endorphins act in a supporting role to the brain-derived neurotrophic factor gene by blocking pain and reducing the cost associated with the benefits of exercise. Actually, from doing a lot of studying on this, it was found very, very interesting that the endorphins connect to your opioid receptors in your neurons, and there's a lot of people out there that actually are addicted to opioids, and therefore they get that immediate response of euphoria. Exercise will give you that same, however, it's not an immediate. It's 30 minutes before it's ever you can achieve that. So then there's that question, okay, does exercise become then an addiction? Is this a problem in itself? And studies and scientists say, no, this exercise generally, you do have your few that have that need to exercise all the time. Those are your marathon runners or your millennium runners who are doing 100 miles. But because it requires too much time. Exercise requires time, it requires thought. It's not an immediate response. We don't automatically get that feeling of euphoria. However, as we talked about before, it has lots of others. And when you look back and you just, how amazing it is that God actually made us so that we are able to do something to make us healthier, and then we don't feel the pain. So it's actually kind of amazing how that takes place. Exercise is really for the brain, not for the body. It affects mood, vitality, alertness, and feelings of well-being. By exercising in the morning before going to work, you are not only spiking your brain activity, it also prepares you for mental stresses for the rest of the day. And it also produces an increase in retention of new information and have better responses to the complex situations. For more than a decade, neuroscientists and physiologists have gathered evidence of beneficial relationship between exercise and brain power. The newest findings make it clear that this isn't just a relationship, it is the relationship. Scientists in just the past few months have discovered that exercise appears to build a brain that resists physical shrinkage and enhance cognitive flexibility. Therefore, the neuroscientists are suggesting that exercise does more to just bolster our thinking. Exercise does more to bolster our thinking than thinking does itself.
Thank you, Karen. Even though you can't exercise right now, you might want to wiggle your fingers and pretend you're exercising and take a deep breath, because now you see your mind has been expanded with music, and now you know what to do to keep that mind going. And I like the aspect of the restructuring of these things up here that start diminishing at age 30. So there are a few of us in this room that need a bit of restructuring. Now we know how to do it.